Hi, I'm Nikolas Monti-Potsolakis, and this is SEO in 2025 Additional Insights.
Nicholas, what's your additional insight for SEO in 2025?
So today I thought we will be talking about the non-SEO side of things. So all the things that make SEO important when it comes to whether you're working in a company or as a freelancer like myself. So building relationships, showing empathy, and understanding what the client is about, not just doing SEO for SEO, but for the client's sake.
Great. Okay, so the non-SEO side of things that impacts SEO. So how do you measure the ROI of building relationships, talking to your clients, showing empathy, those kind of words that you used?
How to measure the success. So I believe there are different types of metrics that you can use. Of course, there is the quantitative side of things. So you will always need to track visibility of your client across different platforms, engagement, or monitor conversions, which are in the end what's important for the client, because if you don't bring them conversions, whether these are sales or signups or leads, this is one important part. You also need to be aware of qualitative metrics. For example, if you conduct surveys or take feedback from your stakeholders within or the client themselves to see if they're satisfied with progress so far, and to also evaluate it every time and say, okay, this is what worked within the engagement, this is what didn't work. Or, for example, this is what the brand perception of the client is after we've done the planning that we've done. And the last part, I think, is it's important to have a lot of case studies and tests, documents and experiments available publicly or not, to make sure that everything that you're optimizing is well optimized and that you basically succeed in enhancing the customer journey and the touch points and actually achieving the goal of the client, what was in the initial engagement. That's what I think is the most important things that you should be aware of every time.
So is this empathy, this relationship building a nice to have, or would you say it's probably one of the first things that you'll focus on when building a new campaign?
So I wouldn't say that it's a nice to have. I think it's very important in terms of understanding your client. I mean, it's one thing to actually do your job and be like an outsider, but if you actually are into the business and actually care about what the business is about their objectives, about what their goals are, or about what each department is doing, I think that's more important to understand. Or, for example, because in SEO, you might have a lot of dependencies. It's important to be part of the business in terms of understanding and, for example, don't enforce an initiative or, for example, a technical deployment if you see that there is a dependency of the client in terms of technical limitations. So it's better for them to bring it to their level and understand what you can do now versus to where you want to go in the future and better improve them. So I think it's a pretty important factor to keep in mind every time.
So you talk about the importance of being part of a business, but if you're an agency and if you have clients and those are the businesses that you're talking about there, how much involved in the client's business can you actually be?
That's a good question. You cannot, it depends on the client. You cannot not always be involved 100%. So what you would rely more is to build relationships with the different stakeholders, either with the client themselves or when it comes to the different teams. So if they have different teams, like a developer team and a designer team, a content team, and so on, to be able to speak their own language and basically explain better what you want to achieve in their own terms, so they understand, not just you blabbing about SEO jargon that wouldn't make sense otherwise. Also to understand if they have bureaucracy. So if you want to enforce, let's say, some initiative, if there's some legal limitation, you need to speak to the legal department. It actually happened a few times with me as well, that I wanted to promote some initiative and there was a legal limitation anyway. So I had to sit down with the legal team and understand from their own perspective what is the problem, and from my own perspective to make them understand what we want to achieve and why we want to do anything that we want to do. I think that the most important part of this, especially if you're on the client, on the agency side or consultant or freelancer, that you need to be aligned with the company, like I mentioned before, with their goals, not just enforce, okay, this is what you do, this is SEO, do it. To be a bit more receptive of what they want to achieve and align with their own goals. Otherwise, there's no sense. I mean, if I'm doing one thing and they want to achieve another, it's not a successful engagement in the end.
Got you. Okay, I like your example of drilling down inside a business and actually really finding what the real challenge is. You talked about maybe legal issues potentially as well within a business. So not necessarily to take problems at face value, to see why they occurred and to see if it's possible to stop them repeating in the future.
Yeah, exactly. That would be also a great approach. I mean, it's one thing to put a band-aid and fix an issue, but it's another thing to stop something from happening. I actually had this discussion last week with a client, and we were talking about how to actually fix a thing and how to stop it from happening again. So that, yes, exactly, that's part of the engagement and understanding on their own side.
So you talk about building as close a relationship with the client as possible. When you onboard a new client, is there a certain system or series of steps that you go through in order to actually build that relationship as quickly as possible?
Yes, usually in the beginning, it's important to have like a list of questions that you start building with experience. For example, what is their objectives? What is their capacity? If they've done any SEO work before, what is their budget? Things like this that you want to understand, and also give them the opportunity to explain how they see their business. I also many times asked, for example, I have a list of organic competitors that, from an SEO perspective, they are good for them to compete, but from their own side, they might have a different perspective on what are the business competitors that they want to compete. So, for example, if there is a small store and telling me that I want to compete with Apple, I will tell them, okay, we have to find some middle ground somewhere, and be more realistic on what we need to do. And after that, after we have the first discovery, and to sit down together and set some more realistic goals based on their answers, their capacity, and everything. And also to be flexible with the budget, the timelines, but all at the same time try to stick to them. So if you set a timeline, to not let them procrastinate and not do anything. Otherwise, you will lose them. So if there's a very big gap, especially that happens a lot with enterprises, if there's a very big gap between one SEO initiative and the other, sometimes you lose them. So you make sure that you're there with them, you take their hand, like their kids' first day in school, and you guide them through the process and you make sure that they understand what needs to be done.
So if a client is unrealistic with their expectations, you use the example of wanting to compete against Apple for certain keyword phrases potentially. How would you go about persuading them that what their own objectives aren't realistic and the right ones to be focusing on?
I think that it's important to manage expectations from the beginning, what I would be able to do, for example, as an SEO professional for them, in order for them to also know. So if they tell me something unrealistic that they want to be number one in page, or in the page of Google, in the first page of Google, against all the competitors in 1 week, I would have to first of all keep them to a more realistic level and manage the expectation that this is not possible. And the best way to do it is either with past use cases or with actual data, and explain to them how long it takes and what needs to be done with either real data or past use cases to show them this is what needs to be done to go to first place on the first page of Google. I mean, it cannot be done in 1 week. So it needs time, and since SEO is more for the long-term game, that's what they need to be able to understand. To actually break it down to them that this is the steps we need to do. It's not possible in 1 day to do it. I usually use like examples like building a house, or for example, when you have a back pain and you need to do like a physiotherapy plan, that it's a step process. It's not like 1 day directly and that's it. It's not like PPC, that we press on a button and everything works directly. So these are important things you have to keep in mind.
Is it possible that building relationships and having greater empathy can have an impact on traditional SEO metrics? Are there some metrics that you can track in conventional analytics dashboards that indicate to you that you've done a good job with building relationships and increasing empathy?
I think that it's one ratio, for example, that you can use is if you have a list of tasks that you want to implement. I did this recently as well. So let's say that we have a list of 10 tasks that you need to do. If you see that the completion rate is 2 tasks every 2 months, it means that they're not taking maybe things so seriously, or there is a problem that you need to fix somewhere. So either way, there is some action for me to do after that. But if you see that they're actually working very fast, they are completing the task that you give it in a reasonable time within the timeline that you have set, it means that they're actually investing and want to invest in SEO and that they understand that this is important for them. And also, I think what we mentioned before about the brand reception. So, if you see that there's a lot of customer satisfaction and that people perceive the brand as something very good, as opposed to when you started, I think that this is a very indicative metric that things are going well and actually people are recognizing the brand and the company, not just from an SEO perspective or from a product perspective or whichever, but from their own customer perspective. They see the value in this company. I think these are the most indicative ways to see if things are working and actually what you're doing, the empathy and all this part is actually a good thing or not.
What percentage of an SEO's time should he spend on building relationships and empathy and the areas that you're discussing here? And also, how do you incorporate empathy into an SEO strategy?
That's a good question. I think the first part, I would say the usual phrase that all SEOs use, it depends. It depends first on the level that you're working on. I mean, usually on an enterprise client, it might be up to even 80% of talking to people, building relationships, working with teams, and another 20% doing the actual work. And also it depends for in other levels. So, for example, if you're in a lower level, like a specialist or in an in-house team, maybe you take more time doing the work and learning, which means that it depends also on your own level. So if you are like a more junior and you want to learn, you put in a lot of work towards the actual work. And then as you start building your soft skills, if you like, you start working towards this type of softer skill, like the empathy. But I think it depends on the client as well. If you are an enterprise, I think most of the time, if it's a smaller client, maybe, they don't have the capacity, they don't have the team, they don't have the know-how. So you might need to spend 50% of your time doing the actual work and another 50% pampering and actually talking to them and working closely with them. So I think it depends on the client as well a lot.
And how do you justify spending so much time on this to your boss or even to the clients when they're just saying, just focus on the activities that you agree to do for them, maybe content or links or wherever you're focusing on as an SEO? Can you not just spend 100% of your time doing that?
You could, sure, but I mean, the reason you're there is also that you have the knowledge to understand some things better than they would otherwise. The specific only SEO work or how to do things and methodology that you cannot teach them in one day. So from my perspective, you would have the know-how and the methodology. It'll be like the more strategic advisor and know how to do things and then go from the strategy to the actual actions that they will need to do. And again, as mentioned before, for example, if you see that you mentioned the content, for example, if you see that in the beginning they were producing only one article, but you asked for 30, but slowly you start building up this frequency and they actually manage to produce 30 articles, let's say per month instead of one. This is also a win for you. So you actually up the productivity in terms of SEO and also from a strategic advisor perspective, and then which is something you can measure with the traffic they bring, the internal links, and all these things that you build that actually help towards SEO, as an example. Or if it's a development team, if there are a lot of issues that you fix, that actually you measure that they impact SEO in a good way, and they actually bring some ROI to the client or they improve their performance, for example. This is indirectly something that you actually can prove, and that actually chasing a developer team to do the things that you want right, it's important for them to fix things in the end, because they might not know, they might not have the capacity, the knowledge, many things that are dependent on fixing stuff.
If an SEO is struggling for time, what should they stop doing right now so they can spend more time doing what you suggest in 2025?
I think that many SEOs have the tendency to prioritize or not prioritize, to get stuck into isolated metrics. So, for example, only keyword rankings, only domain authority. or only click-through rate, or only one metric that on its own might not mean much. But if you put it into context and take into consideration the intent of the customer, and also, again, what we mentioned before, the business goals, if you put them together and you give them the context, it should make more sense, because this way you build a strategy that contributes to the broader customer journey, and actually you help them, you help the client achieve this customer journey. As an example, you should stop creating content only for keywords. This is one thing that I think SEOs did bad. They created content for SEO, not for the content itself. So stop focusing only on the keyword that you will use in the content. And I think this is what gave the industry a bad name as well, many times. So instead, you should develop resources that actually address the user intent and give an answer to what they're looking for. And so stop chasing goals and keywords, and just actually show value to the client. And the last thing, for example, a lot of people get stuck on algorithm updates. So instead of getting stuck on every algorithm update, you should build a resilient strategy for the client and make sure that they're future-proofed as much as you can to your capacity. Basically, like we said, they are working towards user satisfaction, long-term visibility, customer satisfaction, all these things, instead of just getting fixated on one small thing. I think this is what's the thing that people should stop doing.
Nikolas Monti-Potsolakis is an international SEO consultant, and you can find him over at nmpconsulting.co. Nikolas, thanks so much for adding your additional insight to SEO in 2025.
Thank you very much.
I've been your host, David Bain, and you've been listening to SEO in 2025 Additional Insights, a Majestic series that complements the original podcast, video series, and book. Find out more at SEOin2025.com.